I remember the day my world shifted, the day my brother collapsed in the living room, pale and trembling, the color draining from his face faster than I could comprehend. The doctor's words hit like a thunderclap: a rare heart condition, life-threatening, and the treatment would cost nearly $200,000 that our family didn't have, not even close. My parents stared at me blankly, as if hoping someone else would magically produce the money, while I felt the icy grip of responsibility tighten around my chest. I had always been the dependable one, the one who quietly took on burdens that others wouldn't even acknowledge. My brother had been reckless his entire life, never thinking about consequences, and now his life depended entirely on me. I swallowed my resentment because, at that moment, there was only one thing that mattered: keeping him alive. The next 2 years were a blur of sleepless nights, double shifts, and endless sacrifices. I sold my car, took out every bit of personal savings, and worked freelance gigs that left me drained but kept the medical bills moving forward. I watched him in the hospital, hooked up to machines, weak and terrified, while my parents hovered in the background, their presence more ceremonial than supportive. I had to fight off the silent accusation in my own head that maybe, just maybe, they thought I was overreacting, that he would survive somehow without my intervention. Every payment I made, every painstaking penny I scraped together, felt like a small victory against an unfair world. I sacrificed birthdays, anniversaries, and even my own health, thinking that one day my efforts would be acknowledged, maybe even cherished. I convinced myself that love could overcome everything, even parental indifference. And then, finally, the miracle came. His treatment worked. He improved slowly at first, and then with a stubborn vitality that made the doctors smile. I remember the day he walked out of the hospital with a weak grin, the weight of machines gone, and for a moment I allowed myself to breathe. Relief washed over me, a bittersweet mixture of exhaustion and triumph. I had given everything for him, and he had survived. I expected gratitude, maybe not words, but a recognition in their eyes. I imagined my parents would finally see the depth of my sacrifice. I imagined my brother, forever aware of the debt I had carried on his behalf, would look at me differently. But the truth is, when my heart swelled with relief, their eyes were still distant, polite, detached. Their smiles were hollow, and my brother's eyes carried the same entitlement they always had, unburdened by the reality that someone had literally risked everything to keep him alive. That night, as I lay in my empty apartment, my body sore from years of work and worry, a strange bitterness settled into my chest. I loved my family, but love had become a currency I spent endlessly, while they seemed blind to its value. I had given them my everything, and I had nothing left, not recognition, not comfort, not even hope that my efforts mattered in their eyes. Yet deep down, I clung to the one truth that no one could take away. I had saved him, and that, I thought, was worth everything, even if they never understood. I thought the worst was over. My brother had survived, the hospital bills were finally settled, and I had begun to imagine a quiet life of recovery, of being able to breathe again without the constant, suffocating weight of debt and worry. But life has a way of delivering blows when you least expect them, and this one came wrapped in the guise of a family celebration. It started innocently enough. My parents called a meeting, a gathering in the living room that they insisted was important for the family. I arrived, tired and weary, carrying the invisible scars of 2 years of sacrifice. My brother sat there, smiling comfortably, already basking in the unearned glow of survival. My parents' expressions were unreadable, but I sensed the storm before it broke. Then they dropped the bomb. Grandma's inheritance, the entire estate, her life savings, her memories packed into property and money, was being given solely to him. My blood ran cold. I blinked, certain I had misheard, certain that fatigue and disbelief were conspiring against me. "Your brother needs this more," my mother said gently, as if that explained everything. "He's just starting his life again after what he went through. You understand, right?" I wanted to laugh, or scream, or cry. I wasn't sure which would have been less humiliating. 2 years of my life, every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every dollar I had scraped together to save him, and this was the reward. Not a word of acknowledgement, not even a gesture of gratitude. Just the quiet erasure of my efforts, replaced with the illusion that his survival alone made him more deserving than the person who had literally paid for it. I sat there, stunned, my mind struggling to reconcile the reality before me. My parents' eyes were cold, distant, almost proud of themselves for what they believed was fairness. But fairness is not blind. It's about recognizing the weight each person carries. I had carried him, had carried their indifference, had carried their disappointment, and now they had chosen to carry none of mine. And my brother, he didn't even look at me. He smiled faintly, a shadow of innocence masking the entitlement that had always defined him. Perhaps he hadn't even realized what had been done, or perhaps he had, and it didn't matter. The realization cut deeper than anything else. The people I had risked everything for, the people I had loved without hesitation, had betrayed me with ease, as if my existence and my sacrifices were invisible. The ride home was silent. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I thought about every dollar I had given, every hour I had lost, and every sleepless night I had endured. I thought about my brother's pale, terrified face in the hospital, and how I had been the only one fighting for his life. And yet now, that same family treated my love and devotion as if it were meaningless. Anger bubbled beneath the surface, mingling with a deep, aching sorrow. I realized in that suffocating silence that my love for them would never be enough to earn their respect. If my sacrifice had taught them nothing else, it had taught me one undeniable truth. Blind loyalty can be met with betrayal, and the people you trust most can be the ones who hurt you deepest. And for the first time in my life, I understood that love alone could not protect me. If I wanted justice, or even the faintest echo of recognition, I would have to take it myself. The seed of revenge was planted that night, watered by betrayal, nurtured by anger, and ready to grow. After the betrayal, life became a careful exercise in restraint. On the surface, I smiled, nodded, and played the dutiful sibling, the responsible child. But underneath, a storm was gathering, coiling tight in my chest like a living thing. Every word my brother spoke, every casual glance from my parents, fanned that storm. The injustice of it, the ease with which they dismissed my sacrifices, was unbearable. I realized quickly that anger alone would not serve me. If I wanted to reclaim what had been taken not necessarily in dollars, but in dignity and respect, I would have to be patient, clever, and strategic. The first step was observation. I began to notice patterns I had ignored before. My parents' financial habits, my brother's entitlement, and the subtle ways they flaunted their newly inherited wealth. My brother didn't even bother working consistently, confident that everything he wanted was guaranteed. My parents, meanwhile, seemed to take a quiet pride in his dependency, smiling at his every whim, as if their own sense of morality were intact. I noted it all, every weakness, every flaw, every hidden desire. I catalogued them in my mind like pieces of a puzzle I intended to assemble. Next came the subtle distancing. I withdrew from family dinners and casual conversations, feigning exhaustion and overwork, while secretly relishing the look of confusion on their faces. They couldn't understand why I wasn't falling over myself to celebrate their generosity. That ignorance, that arrogant assumption that their decisions didn't affect me, became my greatest weapon. I let them underestimate me. I let them think I was broken, defeated, and still loyal. At night, when the world was quiet and I was alone with my thoughts, I began crafting the plan in detail. I thought about leveraging their own weaknesses against them, my brother's arrogance, my parents' pride, their blind faith in appearances. I imagined scenarios where their decisions would unravel, exposing their selfishness and entitlement for everyone to see. Every possibility was weighed, every risk considered. My mind became a labyrinth of schemes, each one more calculated than the last, each one designed to deliver a lesson in humility and justice. Yet even as I plotted, there was a moral tension that gnawed at me. I wasn't cruel by nature. I hated the idea of hurting the people I had loved all my life. But betrayal had changed me. It had revealed the truth about human nature. Love is not always enough to protect you from greed and favoritism. If I wanted to preserve my self-respect, if I wanted them to understand the magnitude of what they had done, I had no choice but to act. I began with small moves, correcting subtle financial missteps they overlooked, quietly guiding friends and acquaintances to recognize my contributions, letting them see the respect and admiration I had earned elsewhere. My parents noticed. Of course, they always did, but they underestimated me. My brother noticed too, but only as a flicker of irritation, never as the quiet reckoning I was preparing. By the time I was ready, I would not just reclaim what was taken from me emotionally. I would turn the very foundation of their entitlement against them. The plan was no longer just a fantasy. It had become a purpose, a slow burning fire fueled by betrayal and the desire for justice that only comes when those who wrong you think they are untouchable. And in that calculated silence, I felt a strange thrill, the first real sense of control I had experienced in years. I had been powerless once, never again. The moment I had been waiting for arrived quietly, without fanfare or warning. By then, I had spent months preparing, weaving a web so subtle that even my brother and parents didn't suspect it. Every step of my plan had been meticulous, small financial maneuvers, subtle exposure of their arrogance, and the cultivation of alliances outside the family that would give me leverage when the time came. Now, the final act was at hand. It began with my brother. I started planting seeds of responsibility, encouraging him to take steps in investments and business that seemed harmless at first. I made suggestions under the guise of concern, guiding him into situations where his entitlement and laziness would leave him exposed. Every misstep he made, every mistake magnified by his ignorance, reflected back on him. I watched from the sidelines as his confidence faltered, the first cracks appearing in the smug mask he had always worn. Meanwhile, I subtly undermined my parents' assumptions about fairness. I ensured that friends, colleagues, and even distant relatives understood the sacrifices I had made, framing the narrative in a way that highlighted their favoritism. Invitations to family events, casual conversations, and even casual social media mentions all reminded the world that I had given everything for a brother they now treated as favored. Rumors spread, not maliciously but pointedly, an invisible hand that revealed the truth of their choices without seeming like revenge. The most delicious part came when I orchestrated a series of financial revelations. My brother's reckless spending and mismanagement began to surface publicly, his entitlement unraveling in ways that my parents could not control. Slowly, they realized that their decision to give him the inheritance, believing he would prosper, had backfired. Their pride turned to panic, their complacency to worry. They began to plead, to justify, to argue, but by then, the seeds I had planted had taken root. And through it all, I remained calm, polite, and supportive. The very picture of the devoted sibling I had always been. I let them fumble, I let them stumble, and I let them feel the sting of the consequences they had ignored for so long. No words of anger escaped my lips, no dramatic confrontations. I didn't need them to see my hand. I needed them to feel it and feel it deeply. The climax arrived quietly but inevitably. My brother faced a public embarrassment, his financial misjudgments laid bare, while my parents' reputations as wise and fair arbiters of family wealth crumbled around them. And through it all, I watched, unflinching, knowing that I had orchestrated the outcome without stooping to cruelty, without losing my dignity. When the dust settled, I felt a strange sense of liberation. I had not only preserved my self-respect, but I had delivered justice in the only currency that mattered, the recognition of truth. My parents could no longer ignore the sacrifices I had made. My brother could no longer act as if he were untouchable. The scales finally had shifted. I didn't revel in their pain. I reveled in the acknowledgement that my efforts, my sacrifices, and my love had weight, that even in betrayal, I had the power to reclaim myself. The storm of anger that had driven me softened into a calm clarity. I had been powerless once, but now I stood unshakable, a silent testament to the truth that love, patience, and calculated resolve can triumph over entitlement and betrayal. And in the quiet aftermath, as I walked away from the chaos I had orchestrated, I finally felt free. Free from the weight of their indifference, free from the bitterness that had once threatened to consume me. Free to live my life on my terms, knowing that justice had been served, not loudly, not violently, but with the quiet, enduring power of truth.